Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, today I have Samantha Harte on the line, and she is an artist, a podcast host, a doctor of physical therapy. She's a coach, and she's a sober mom of two. Samantha, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, so we got a lot to talk about here today. So overall topic, so recovery is a journey, not as a destination. And then I definitely want to get into your acclaimed book, Breaking the Circuit. So we'll get into that as well. You're redefining the 12 steps for anyone that's facing adversity. And really, you're offering a roadmap to joy and healing. So I'm excited to get into that and the inspiration. But I guess just to start us off here, give us the backstory. So how did you get started on this path to helping others?
Well, I came from a family of addicts, not knowing at all that I would eventually become. And so I was very much a codependent, and I was very good at it. And I was also very good at perfecting the world around me so that I could feel safe and whole on the inside. And at some point, the perfectionism had such a noose around my neck that the unrelenting anxiety of nothing ever being enough, not pretty enough, not thin enough, not smart enough, led to, well, of course I'm going to drink. And if you have something else available, I'm going to try that too. And not only is that normal based on what I've seen growing up, but surely I will stay in control of it. And so that very quickly led to this really captures a moment in time of the way I was living, that on the evening of getting accepted into my doctoral program for physical therapy, I overdosed on cocaine. So this was a long time before I was ready to help others. I was an absolute empty vessel, but that scare introduced me to the 12-step rooms. I wouldn't go back for another year and a half, and I wouldn't really hit spiritual rock bottom for another 5 years. So I think it's amazing with whatever the crisis is that someone's facing, if they are granted the gift of desperation as soon as humanly possible. Because to me, pain, and this brings me to the book, is a circuit breaker. And the physical therapist in me can explain that such that, we move however we move. Many of those processes are automatic and intrinsic, and everything's fine until it isn't, until we get a pain signal. And all of a sudden, we're moving the same way we always have, but now our knee hurts every time we do. And the same thing is true in the emotional, psychological, and spiritual body, where we cope a certain way. We have belief systems that have been conditioned, hardwired, and they work for us until they don't. And when they stop working, we have pain. Pain is kind of this, not just a literal wake-up call, but it is a physiologic circuit breaker because it disrupts the feedback loop that we've been inside of. And when I was 5 years sober, I was still holding on to perfectionism as my main coping mechanism, even though I was abstaining from drugs and alcohol. Turns out perfectionism collapses in matters of the heart, and I was in a pretty extreme marital crisis, and there was no thing that I could say or do to make my husband forgive me for what had happened in my active addiction. And that is when real rock bottom took place for me, which is a place I define as not wanting to die, but being unable to go on living the way that you're living. And so, it's quite a story, but, in terms of like recovery being a journey and not a destination, that's just life. The person that's in recovery of anything, by the way, not just substance, recovery of old patterns, old beliefs, old jobs, old identities. We are humans who are trying to recover from the prior state. And so because that's true, we are evolving. We are ever evolving, whether we like it or not. And so if that's true, then inherently everything is a journey, even though we can't help but fixate on the destination, because the destination feels like control. It feels certain. The journey is not certain. The journey is actually the opposite. And so I think in recovery, of all the amazing things I've learned 16 years into my sobriety at this point, it's that real peace and real joy is having deep certainty in the not knowing that is life. And I think if you can master that, your business is going to be successful. You're going to be able to find your way back to health if you've lost it. Your personal relationships will be able to recover and then hopefully thrive, right? If you're able to tap into an inner framework that takes the situations of your life when there's no clarity around them and has you go, how can I expand in the face of this? What is this here to teach me? And how do I prepare myself for all the amazing things that are coming, even though right now all I see is darkness? If that's the work of your life, which is what my work now is, that of course was not the idea or the plan when I was getting sober. I just wanted someone to teach me how to drink like a lady, But I think if we can master that skill, we're tapping into a resource that's infinite, that allows for infinite possibilities in these worldly things, these destinations we so badly think that we want, like the house, like the 7-figure income, like the perfect partner. Right? And it's a very outside-in framework. And I think based on everything I've lived through, and, the impetus to write the book was having lost my big sister, Jessica, to a drug overdose 3 years ago. And up until that moment, I was a body expert. I had a private practice that treated whole body, whole person in Santa Monica, and it was successful. And yet I was living this sober life, and I could see in these patients who were not addicts the soul sickness they were suffering from, much like the addicts in the 12-step rooms. And I wanted to do something about it. But who was I to treat their spirit? I was a physical therapist, not a psychologist. Right. And after I lost my sister, the only thing I knew for sure were two things. One, I had to write a book. And two, I had to put spirituality at the epicenter of my work in the world. And it's kind of amazing, because I'm a year out from the book being published, and I've successfully and very painfully, confronted my hardest things so that the book got out to the world. And I do put spirituality at the center because we are inside of systems that point the compass towards the outside thing. And I believe if we have a way to redirect our thinking internally as at least a starting point, again and again and again, through a series of things that happen in our lives, we're going to be way better off. And we're going to achieve the life we want much, much faster than if we do it the other way around.
Samantha, I want to get into maybe some of the tools, especially when we talk about things like negative thought patterns or some things that get us into those situations in our life that maybe don't feel very hopeful and doesn't feel like we can, get out of it, or maybe even feel like we're not in our control, right? What are the tools that you can use or that you provide for people to help, rewire their negative thought pattern?
Yeah. When I was in this marital crisis, I had up until that point worked the steps as best I could, but they never really felt true to me. And part of that was just they were butting up against childhood beliefs that kept me safe. And now the 12 steps were asking me to unwind all of my belief systems, right? So in the marital crisis, a woman said, what if we do the steps on your marriage? And I was like, what do you mean? So we really repurposed the language and the framework to match the crisis that I was in. And when we got to the 9th step, which for the listener is the process of making an amends, I was a 30-year-old woman with a doctorate and in a marriage that was falling apart and obsessed with perfecting the world around me and the people, places, and things in it, and miserable. And this woman said, have you ever made an amends to yourself? And I hadn't. And I hadn't even considered it. I didn't even know I was allowed. So in the questioning of how do you even begin to change that pattern of unrelenting negative self-talk? Well, I can speak directly to that because I was living that way for 3 decades. And for me, the first step was permission. Now, could you grant yourself permission? Theoretically, yes. But if you're really blended with that part of yourself, if that part that's speaking to you that way has been protecting you, especially if you've had bigger trauma in your life, it's going to be very hard for you to grant yourself permission because you can't separate yourself from that identity. You see what I mean? For me, I was the perfectionist. Without that, I wasn't anyone. So when this woman asked me the question, what it did for me was it allowed me to split myself and go, wait a minute. if that's just a part of me that's telling me this is what I get for what I did and that I deserve this terrible marriage, and it's not all of me, then what would the part of me that wants a fulfilling marriage, that wants deep love and forgiveness in her life, what would that part of me say instead? And then I had to imagine what that was and double down on saying it. So literally the work, like if you were to learn how to play the piano, how would you wire yourself to know that? Well, you'd hire a great teacher, or you'd get on YouTube and you would make a system, and every day, to the best of your ability, you'd practice for a certain amount of time, again and again and again, right? And so I did the same thing with this pattern. I had a consciousness. It was like an antenna went up when she gave me permission, so that in the weeks and days and months to follow, I saw how often I spoke to myself with disdain. And I saw that as a part of me, but not as who I was. And instead of believing everything that part of me said as gospel, instead of trying to numb the voice, now I wasn't numbing it at 5 years sober with drugs, but we can numb in all kinds of ways. Instead of either of those, I confronted it, but lovingly. So what did I do? I became compassionately curious about that part of me. Oh, look at how I speak to myself. I've been doing that for a really long time. So my default is to go, what the fuck is wrong with you? And the shift is to go, why do I do this? Not why did you do this? You shift the tone of your negative self-talk from critical to compassionately curious. Why? Because then you start to take an inventory of all the potential reasons why things might look the way they do, whether it's how you're speaking to yourself, how you're treating somebody else, your relationships, your work life. You start to become open and flexible about all the factors that could be contributing. Because if you just criticize, you're an idiot. Well, then guess what? You've figured it out. You're the problem. There's nothing you can do about it. When it's shame-based, you stamp yourself as the problem, and there's no way to think of solution. When you stay curious about, and this is for anything, if you stay curious, you go, I see what's happening. I can see a few reasons why I just went to that place in my mind. And so now that I understand with compassion, where am I willing to take radical responsibility right now in my life from this seat of consciousness? Because I can do something about it right now with this awareness. And and then you have to take the action in that direction. And as soon as that becomes your practice, your life starts to change. And I have story after story after story about how that has happened for me. And I have, 3 decades of lived experience of letting that protective perfectionist part of me run my life and the results that gave me. And it was a lot of external things, right? A lot of destinations, if you will. But the journey was riddled with anxiety, self-loathing, and fear. And when it shifted into this curious and responsible place, because I reestablished a sense of higher self and I wasn't being run by this lower level self, well, then I could listen in for the direction she had for my life. Because one of the blessings of making this amends was that there, in fact, was another part of me. There was this beautiful, wise, intuitive, bold, investigative part of me that we all have. When we're little, kids say how they feel. They ask for what they need until they learn not to. And that part of me came back, and I went, I wonder what would happen if I listened to that part of me, the direction she was nudging me. If I took responsibility based on that voice, what that voice is wanting me to do, what would happen in my life? And sure enough, when I did, miracle after miracle, and I'm not saying it was all roses from there, right? Tons of heartbreak, tons of pain, but I can't think of a bad thing that has happened to me in the last 11 years since doing the step work in that way that has happened as a result of listening to that part of myself. Now, if I fall back and I listen to the controlling part, the codependent part, then I'm in trouble. And I've done that plenty of times. There's a big difference when I'm out of alignment with my highest self and the ramifications, So that's how you make a start, right? You got to be sick of how you're treating yourself. You have to get someone you trust or have the courage to separate yourself from that part of you so much so that you understand that that's not your entire identity. So there needs to be a permission slip. And then you need to start doubling down on how often you're speaking to yourself negatively. And you need to literally not just read a positive affirmation on the internet. You need to have something birthed from within you that's true in your nervous system, that feels safe, that feels expansive, loving, hopeful, encouraging, calm, clear, and start practicing saying that. So whatever comes up when you imagine that, you say it again and again, and every time the negative thing comes up, you replace it with the thing that you thought of, and you say it again, and you say it again, and you say it again. And you do this over and over and over, as if you were practicing to be a prodigy on the piano.
That's awesome. Samantha, this has been great having you on the show today and just getting really the tip of the iceberg of the content you have to create and really that you've created and the value that you have to give. I know there's so much more, including your podcast. I mean, of course, your book. How do people follow your brand? How do they connect? How do they obviously grab a book? And how do they work with you? Like, how do people connect?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, which is at Dr. Samantha Harte, and it's Harte. And you guys can literally DM me. I will respond. I don't have bots or assistants responding on my behalf.
Amazing.
And there's also access from the bio on Instagram or my actual website, which is the same, drsamanthahart.com, to book a free discovery call. And on the website, you can peruse and just learn all about all the different things I do. I have live events in LA once a month. My podcast, as you said, my book, I have all kinds of one-off programs, group coaching, one-on-one coaching. I have a whole ecosystem. So a great starting place, I think, for someone who hears this and goes, whatever she just said, I need to speak to her, book a call, because there's nothing like that. If I can't meet you in person, which is the dream, is to connect in real time, then the second best thing is to look you in the eye on a call. And so I can speak directly to your heart.
Amazing.
Pun intended.
I got the fun. I was waiting. You dropped it. I was waiting. I paused. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links in the show notes so you can just click on the link and head right on over. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way in your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Samantha, thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate all you do and wish you much more continued success with both your podcast and, of course, your book. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much.